I did want to bring. Do you want to read this article? I wanted to show these pictures that I sent you.
Yeah, well, I got the pictures here. You want to mention? You talk about the picture first. I made a little montage here for you.
Okay, good. So yeah, last episode we talked about as a result of the Buffalo shooting and the shooter, which has all sorts of inconsistencies and strange things going on with it. It was used mainly as an opportunity to connect Republicans with a sort of an established racist ideology. And, the shooter, it was not a lone wolf. He was a mainstream Republican, and great replacement theory is a regular Republican thing. And they were sort of combining two different theories into one to make the case that all Republicans are sort of secret racists. Now, of course, everybody's aware of the idea of the sort of political replacement theory, where if you, for instance, in the example of letting in immigrants, making immigration easier, specifically in the context of Democrats,
wanting votes.
Making quote unquote illegal immigration easier. And protecting illegal immigrants has a political benefit, because if the Democrats let you in and give you a driver's license and all these wonderful things, then you're going to vote Democrat. That's the sort of political replacement theory. The great replacement theory is different, and I love how they've connected this the great onto it. We've had the Great Reset, the Great Reshuffle, the Great Resignation, all the things. Now we got the Great Replacement. And I just have this, I was just going through some articles, and I was like, wow, this is just like literally every outlet is posting articles. It's like the memo went out, and overnight, in the span of 24 hours, pretty much every single mainstream outlet, with the exception of a few conservative ones, had an article stating just this. I'll go through. Newsweek, Great Replacement Theory has inspired 4 mass shootings. PolitiFact, what is the Great Replacement Theory? Linked to Buffalo shooter. Los Angeles Times, CNN Business, Uprocks, Deadline, The Ringer, Time, Vanity Fair, The Guardian, Reuters, Rolling Stone, some more The Guardian, HuffPost, NPR, Vice, Rolling Stones, Vanity Fair, just all down the line. There was hundreds of them. So somehow, the day after the Buffalo shooter, committed his atrocities, it seemed like everybody just pretty much had the script all written out, ready to go.
The great operation has commenced on the Democrat Party.
It's really a sort of beautiful, it's psyop that overnight, usually we track these trends all the time. This is a trend that we would have tracked anyways. But it usually would take a month or two for it to fully saturate the news cycle. And this was strange to us because we've tracked hundreds of trends over the years. And this was the first one that was immediately ubiquitous. Overnight. Yep. Immediately overnight.
And let me dig a little bit into this independent.co.uk article, because I think there's some points to consider here. So the headline is Inside the Data, the Debunks, the Great Replacement Theory.
Oh, we've got some data that debunks it. Okay, all right.
He spoke with great certainty, and yet none exists, even within the racist, trope-filled universe of anger and bigotry into which the alleged Buffalo shooter had stepped. The handrails of hate on which he relied do not survive scrutiny.
Handrails of hate.
Handrails of hate.
That's a good one. I think we got to keep an eye out for that term. Handrails of hate. That's got legs.
Yeah, especially because of all this hate talk we've been hearing from Kamala Harris and all these people talking about it. Even judged by its own white supremacists underpinning the so-called Great Replacement Theory that led an 18-year-old man from Conklin, New York, to drive 2 hours to Buffalo and allegedly open fire inside a Allegedly? Really?
It's
open
for the
fire
lawyers.
inside a supermarket where he hoped to target people of color and where 10 people lost their lives does not stand up. In essence, white people are not suffering a genocide in the U.S. and Europe. And even though there is demographic change, admitting a little bit to the fact that there is demographic change, its scale and extent is hotly debated by experts. Okay, so it's debated by experts.
Scale and exchange. So at best, so far, the Great Replacement Theory is debated by experts.
Yeah, so you just said how horrible. There's data to prove it's wrong, but also, it's hotly debated by the experts. So and there's demographic change to give the idea of some credit. Yeah. Furthermore, say commentators and social scientists, even as the U.S. population becomes more racially diverse, there's little likelihood that white people, as a group, will lose the privileged position it currently holds. See, it's not about just the racism or the decline of the white man. It's the white man will still retain power. Yeah.
Yes.
Quote, which is that is the whole angle on this, which is crazy, but that's what they do. Quote, this event was committed by a sick, demented individual who was fueled by a daily diet of hate, said New York Attorney General Letitia James. Okay, come together. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is invoked. Authorities in Erie County, New York, have charged Peyton Gendron with a single count of first-degree murder, to which he has pleaded guilty. Or not guilty, I'm sorry. He pleaded not guilty. They have said the young man wished to continue his rampage after attacking a Tops supermarket on Saturday. And it goes into some of that. Let me get to the part where it's talking about the important stuff. Officials in New York are presently scrutinizing a 180-page manifesto published on the 4chan website. I thought it was 8chan. I was seeing 4chan in some reports said 8chan.
Yeah, it is weird because 4chan was allegedly...
Isn't it like dead?
Deleted. It's been dead for a while, and so I guess it's back.
Either that or they're just calling 8chan 4chan. I don't know.
Because it died during the Q times.
Right. Allegedly posted by the 18-year-old before embarking on the shooting spree, which he live streamed. It says he was inspired by watching a video of the 2019 mass shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand, which were also live streamed. Quote, this crisis of mass immigration and sub-replacement fertility is an assault on the European people that, if not combated, will ultimately result in the complete racial and cultural replacement of the European people, end quote, says the manifesto, which echoes many of its kind, including that posted by white supremacist Dylan Roof before attacking a black church in Charleston. Yes, it echoes.
It doesn't mention that it's just a straight up copy and paste from some other manifesto, but okay.
Right. The manifesto repeats many of the assertions made by believers in the Great Replacement Theory, an idea of white defeat and decimation that has existed for decades, even centuries, but that has only more recently made use of that name. During the centuries of black slavery in the U.S., there were constant racist claims that white people would lose their place if African Americans were recognized as full citizens. In early 20th century Europe, there was a belief among some that white elites could lose out to migrants from those nations as colonies. The racist themes at the heart of Nazi ideology alleged that white people were going to be wiped out by Jewish people. Okay, so the list of examples here, right, as they go along, you have black people in slavery and how this idea of white people getting wiped out is nonsense. The early 20th century Europe, the Nazi ideology, about the Jewish people, which starts to go off the rails a little bit. You're like, okay, all right, I guess it's the same thing. And then he goes into, in his defense of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin has falsely claimed that the Russian speakers in Ukraine were being wiped out. So just the analogies
they weren't being wiped out. They were just being bombed and shot at for 8 years. Yeah, that's different from being wiped out.
And this is my favorite part of the article. In terms of publications promoting such an idea, the FBI suggests...
Oh, good.
That among the most influential are The Turner Diaries, a 1978 novel written by William Luther Pierce under the pseudonym Andrew MacDonald about a violent revolution in the U.S. with a race war, and Le Grand Remplacement, or The Great Replacement, published in 2011 by Renaud Camus, a French writer.
It's Camus.
whatever. French.
No, I'm just helping
you get out of here.
It's pronounced Camus.
This is one of those authors' names that I've seen written, but I've never actually heard said out loud.
No, it's a weird one. Camus.
Yeah. What did I say?
What was the year on that? You said
2011.
Camus. Yeah. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that it was that recently. But yeah. Okay.
Do you know much about Camus? I'm
trying to figure out if it's the same Camus or not. Because there's in this sort of philosophy, the philosophy industry, Camus is a famous name. I believe it's Albert Camus, though, not. And he would be about 113 years old or something right now.
Yeah,
so I don't think it's the same Camus. I think it's a different Camus.
Okay. Sorry, I'm getting distracted over here. Are we? What's going on?
By a dog?
What's wrong?
A dog. Now, while you're getting distracted, I will say we were freaking out, Gons, because this happened on a non-show day. All this kind of started popping off. And even the Wikipedia for the Great Replacement Theory was changing right before our eyes. It was almost on a minute-to-minute basis. Things were being updated. Articles from that were posted an hour before were being added to the Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia, of course, is it's no surprise to anybody, and is pretty well known that the intelligence apparatus has a nice presence on Wikipedia, and so does the mainstream media. Mm-hmm. It's kind of how they it's part of the apparatus of credentializing
information.
Yeah, and controlling the flow of information. So we were, putting this stuff together, these stories together, and literally we're getting updates to the Great Replacement Theory Wikipedia with articles that were being posted less than an hour before.
Right.
One from CNN got added in there. We got one from, I don't know, NBC. There's just the whole mainstream apparatus. It's almost like they all were throwing their articles into the hat for whoever was editing the Wikipedia to make sure to add them on there.
So what's interesting here is part of the narrative crafting that's going on is taking those who, and it's easy to say Republicans, but truly it's the people who sort of stand for constitutional rights and things like that in this, at least in the U.S.
Well, either way, I mean, it's Democrats stand, they claim to stand for other constitutional rights or whatever. But
I understand, but
a constitutionalist is generally a conservative person in the United States, and now they're
associated
connected
with this Great Replacement thesis here. Yeah, which is
not even associated. Like, associated isn't even strong enough of a word.
Right. They're just being told that's what they are.
They're just full on being categorized as racist extremists, right, just for being a Republican.
So they bring up Carlson, they quote him, they quote Matt Gaetz, and then it goes on to say this: the demographics of America are certainly changing. The Census Bureau said in its most recent publication, quote, the white alone adult population age 18 and over went from 74.7% in 2010 to 64.1% in 2020. That's a 10% drop. In contrast, the multiracial adult population increased from 2.1% in 2010 to 8.8% in 2020. Okay, so saying, all right, the Census Bureau does show that there's a decline.
So the demographics technically are moving in the direction which the Great Replacement Theory predicted.
It would support the idea. Yeah. You can take the extreme sort of conclusion to the trend would be the Great Replacement Theory. Yeah. Okay, but I continue on with this article. But Richard Alba, professor of sociology at the City University of New York and author of Remaking the American Mainstream, tells The Independent that the statement is misleading. The seemingly dramatic decrease, he says, is less about a shift on the ground than a shift in coding by the Census Bureau. and a decision to allow people.
So kind of like COVID.
Yeah, a little finagling with the statistics
counting
there.
COVID.
Yeah.
It's just, it's codes, man. It's just data processing.
Yeah, allow people to choose to report more than one race to indicate their identity. Quote, I think that the Great Replacement theory, like a lot of common alarmist to white ways of looking at demographic changes, is premised on a binary view of society, which is that society is made up of two ethno-racial components, whites on the one hand and non-whites on the other hand, which is funny because the only people doing that are like the people that are saying that this, the people that are believing this theory. Quote,
the loudest proponents of this idea are liberals.
I love this too. Quote, what that distorts is the amount of mixing that's going on in the United States today. That is to say, whites and non-whites forming families, having children. Yeah, isn't that a point for the Great Replacement?
Yeah, wait, I don't understand. Sorry, I was like primed to think you were going to say one thing, but you said something else.
I know. It's just it's a little trickaroo.
What a fun little trick they played on us.
Okay, let me read it again. So he thinks the Great Replacement theory, like a lot of common alarmist to white ways of looking at the demographic change, is premised on a binary view of society, which is that society is made up of two ethno-racial components, white and non-white. What that distorts, the white, non-white binary, false binary view of society, is the amount of mixing that's going on in the U.S. today. That is to say, whites and non-whites forming families, having children. Again, I'm reading this going, wait a minute. Yeah. You just spent all this time telling us how this false theory, the evidence suggests that this theory about the decline of the white thing is just nonsense. But then the person saying that it's nonsense, this professor,
says that it is happening. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but the way that this is written, and I don't know if it's on purpose or not, I suspect it is, literally is sabotaging. Yeah, it's sabotaging my brain before I can even.
Yes, I had to write this. I had to map this out to know. Yeah, to comprehend what was going on. So, yeah, the census affirms the Great Replacement thesis in terms of numbers, in terms of trend, right? With the white male over 18.
The momentum is in the direction.
Right. The momentum is in the direction. The professor denies that the report is accurate and then goes on to give talking points that would support the thesis. That's what just happened there. So it's very what is going on? But
it's like a triple flipperoo.
Oh,
I think
it's meant to confuse people and just. Or confuse anyone trying to pay attention. I'll say that.
Because
people not paying attention won't really pick up on these confusing details.
You just let the headline wash over you, and it doesn't matter what you read. Yeah.
Some estimates suggest that white people in the U.S. could become, quote unquote, minority white by 2045. The year that the Russians are going to upload our consciousness into the machine. Yeah, great year. Yeah. Meaning that year, whites will comprise 49.7% of the population, in contrast to 24.6% for Hispanics, and all the other percentages. Alba, who most recently published The Great Demographic Illusion, Majority, Minority, and the Expanding American Mainstream, says there is far less certainty about when the U.S. becomes majority minority. So, and I won't read the rest of it because we're sort of out of time.
That's great.
I know. So he's saying,
minority.
So he's saying that it's gonna happen, but his whole thing is like, well, it's not happening at the alarming rate that these crazy people shooting up black people are saying.
Well, and that's an interesting point because does seem to be what he's saying, but what I'm unaware of a timeline put on the Great Replacement theory in its racist version. Is there a timeline? Are they giving it's going to happen in 3 years instead of 15?
So I've read some
15 is not that far away also, by the way.
Yeah, so there's more to this article that I would love to dig into. It's just I don't know. You can read it yourself, and I think you can.
You got to hit that psyop jingle is what you got to do.
I do. Let me just mention this though to your question, the origins. I've seen a lot of people mention this theory, which is the Kalergi plan. Have you heard of the Kalergi? Maybe Kalergi.
Yeah, which is basically the Great Replacement, isn't it?
Right.
Wasn't that a European
Coudenhove
European
Kalergi conspiracy. Right. And Wikipedia claims that the whole theory is false because it is a modern right interpretation of this guy's quote from a book called The Praktischer Idealismus. And the quote is, quote, "The man of the future will be of mixed race. Today's races and classes will gradually disappear owing to the vanishing of space, time, and prejudice. The Eurasian Negroid race of the future, similar in its appearance to the ancient," I know, it's a quote, "to the ancient Egyptians, will replace the diversity of peoples with a diversity of individuals." And so Wikipedia is claiming that right-wingers, specifically they mention Gerd Hansik, an Austrian alleged neo-Nazi writer, according to the Wikipedia here, so I don't know how accurate that is.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, never heard of him. Wrote a book called The Kalergi Plan in 2005, and they're saying that's the origin of the, more modern version of this thing. So I don't, it's just one of those things where it's like, all right, these kind of far-fetched, fringe, racist theses that no one really cared about until the mainstream media slapped it onto a shooter.
Until literally 3 days ago.
3 days ago, and all of a sudden, it is the biggest topic of conversation, and it is the underpinning thesis of the Republican Party. So vote Democrat.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And again, of course, we don't. I can't even believe we kind of need to say it, but of course, any act of violence like this is completely absurd and evil. And indeed, I actually don't necessarily doubt that this kid was radicalized. But, as
maybe by the FBI, since they knew exactly what books it came from.
Exactly. Almost certainly had a hand in that, as they do with almost every radicalized young person committing a crime in recent years. And that's not conspiracy theory. There's great mainstream reporting on that.
Yeah.
But the fact that I think this is part of the PSYOP, actually. Yeah. And this theme will come up again later on in the show. Part of the PSYOP is the fact that we actually even have to talk about it right now.
Exactly.
The fact that we even have to talk about this and just simply trying to examine the trends in I would say a professional way, since it is our profession, to track the trends and see where it's coming from and what the rhetorical strategies are here. That very act could so easily be twisted and construed as, carrying water for neo-Nazis or whatever. Right. Such is the mainstream corporate media nowadays.
Yeah. They need to create the enemy so they can present the good guy or the solution. It's all part of the plan.
They're doing a very good job at it, and just in time, too. Mm-hmm. Just in time for the midterms.
This was an NSA-style hybrid war psyops.